what is God's name? Now, this is a challenge for a lot of people because of the fact that there's certain sects and religious orders across this planet that are very passionate about what they believe God's name to be. And that some of them would say that it's a secret, that it's something that has to be protected from the majority of people. If everyone knew what it was, they would abuse it. And then some would say that it doesn't matter. You can pray to anyone. It's almost like just doing like a broad like a radio almost. Like you just say whatever, and whoever is relevant, they'll respond to it. And everything that goes in between there, like if that's a spectrum, like there's all this stuff about it. Who do we call God? What does that mean? All of it. Well, from a Christian perspective, this really comes to a head in a couple of specific ways. One is the Jehovah's Witnesses, who believe that Jehovah is the proper name of God, the explicit name of God, and if you don't refer to him that way, then you are blaspheming. And that they even went to the distance of rewriting the New Testament, which was originally manuscripted in Greek, with the word Jehovah, despite the fact that that's not even a Greek term. They just rewrote the thing in order to fit their worldview about what God's name is. So let's talk about what the Bible says God's name is. So this all roots back into Exodus chapter 3, in which God is speaking to Moses through the burning bush. Moses says, "Who do I say has sent me to the Israelites?" Right? That's the mission. And God responds in verse 14. "I am who I am. You are to tell the people," verse 15, "that I am has sent me to you." And that this is a very, very important name. It's what's referred to as the covenant name of God for the Israelites. It's really important. It's so important that later, obviously, we know about that in Exodus, that at the Mount Sinai, God forbids people from taking the Lord's name in vain. And a way to try and prevent them from doing that, the Jews chose not even to write that covenant name. So all the different ways, more than 6,000 different appearances of this covenant name throughout the Old Testament, they would not write that name. They would abbreviate it using only the consonants, so that it ended up being YHWH, the famous tetragrammaton. You could almost say it's maybe a nickname or a signature, shorthand for that, a stand-in, but that's not the real name. The real name, as far as how it should be pronounced and everything, has been lost. We don't know it. Well, when Jews would be taught during Second Temple Judaism, they would be taught as they're learning the Torah and things, those that actually would be taught how to read Hebrew, they would be taught how to read the Old Testament, the Torah and so forth, the prophets and the Psalms, and they were taught that when you come across that covenant tetragrammaton in the text, that they were to say instead, as they were citing it, Adonai, which is Hebrew for the Lord or my Lord. That's what it means. And so as they would come across this, they would just say the other word instead. And so in English translations, we come across, we have older manuscripts that were translated that actually just have the Lord written in sometimes. And so in a lot of English modern translations, like the English Standard Version or the New American Standard and others, the Holman Christian, that they will just put the Lord in all caps. It's referencing that covenant name. That when you come across it in English, it says the Lord, or these. That's what that means. That it means that covenant, that tetragrammaton. It means it's referencing back to that covenant name given to Moses at the burning bush. Here's the challenge. During roughly about 200 years prior to Christ's birth, 200 BC-ish, there's a group called the Masoretes that were translating the text as scribes, and to simplify that process, rather than having to teach people, when you see this, say that instead, they simplified it. And so they took that tetragrammaton, the YHWH, and they dropped it down, spaced it out basically, and they added the vowel marks from Adonai into it, creating Ayahovah. And so that's where we get this idea of Jehovah eventually, because Greek and Latin didn't have J's. So that there's no way that it could be Jehovah back then. Once it gets translated from the Greek to the Latin and through the Masoretic texts and the Latin Textus Receptus into the Latin Vulgate, when John Wycliffe and William Tyndale start trying to translate the scriptures into English, is when we get Jehovah, because English does have a J in it. So now we have this Jehovah that the Jehovah's Witnesses are so up in arms about. It's less than 400 years old, about 500 years old, basically. That's when it comes into play. So if it's true that Jehovah is so important, the historicity just isn't there. It's just not there for it. The evidence for this claim about Jehovah just isn't there. And see, specifically with the Jehovah's Witnesses, a problematic aspect of it is that they're willing to use this Anglicanized form, which is so recent in history, that most sacred name theisms only fight for the original languages. That's actually what caused people to do the tetragrammaton, is that they were fighting for the original language that it was written in. Muslims with their Quran fight like this about the fact that they only learn it, recite it, memorize it in Arabic. They're very strict about this. If you find a copy of the Quran in English or Spanish or literally any other language, that's considered defiled because it's not in Arabic. If you are a true Muslim, you will learn it in Arabic, both how to read it and how to write it, and how to you'll memorize it that way, you'll recite it that way, because the true name of God is Allah to them. It's not any other language. It's not that Allah is God, and that's the Hebrew word for God. And so it's important to them. Another instance is, so the fact that the Jehovah's Witnesses are willing to settle with this idea of the Anglicanized version instead of, at the very least, going to the Latin or Hellenized version with the Ayahovah, or going all the way back to, why are you not just writing the Tetragrammaton, or going back to the original language? Well, on the one hand, like I said, it's been lost. They can't go back to that original. And so by using this Jehovah back here, they're actually testifying against themselves, contradicting themselves, saying they're using something that we know for a fact is not the name of God, and pretending that it is. But actually, let's go all the way back to the very root, the very, very root. Exodus chapter 3. Remember, verse 14 has this name in it, which, let's just start at 13 maybe. Then Moses said to God, if I come to the people of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? And God said to Moses, verse 14, I am who I am. and he said, say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. The I am is where the Yahweh, the tetragrammaton, is actually abbreviated to. So even if we use that YHWH, that's only referencing the I am portion, not the whole thing. That it's like, my name is Jeff, but my full name is longer than that. But you can use Jeff to refer to me, right? Yeah. So there's a challenge here in that it could mean I am who I am what I am, or I am who I will be. All three of those are found in very ancient manuscripts, which is problematic for us because, again, what is God's name is kind of important, is it not? So the fact that it's just the I am is the central part that everything agrees on, we're fine with, right? That's okay. Here's the thing. Why wouldn't we use the whole thing? Well, one of the reasons is, again, it's been lost. Because of their piety, the ancient Jews refused to write the actual name. And because of that piety, we don't have it. Well, something you need to know about ancient cultures is they believed, and progressing even into the medieval ages, they believed that if you knew the actual name of an entity, whether that's a person or a deity or a spirit or whatever, if you knew its name, you could control it, you could manipulate it, this sort of thing. Think about the fairy tale of Rumpelstiltskin. If you know his name, then you can control him, and it allows you to use the magnificent powers of the Dark One, right? It's similar to that. That caricature is rooted in this ancient belief. So when they would inscribe the name of a deity on an altar, they were in paganisms, that they were essentially, it was like trying to anchor it to whatever that idol was that you engraved it into. It was basically kind of like, now you're mine now. I can control you. You think about it like that if you steal someone's identity online, now you have access to the things that the resources that they have as well. And so in medieval times, this is where the middle name that most people in the West have now comes from. That you would do commerce with your first name, that you could establish contracts with your last name, but you kept your middle name a secret, and that was only for people who knew you intimately, because those were supposed to be safe relationships. If someone outside your family found out your middle name, and they knew what your full name was, they could control you, maybe steal your spirit, things of that nature. Like, there's a lot of superstition in it, but there's a core thing that's throughout a lot of time that people have believed about this. And so in this moment, Moses says, "What's your name, God? How are they going to know who it is that has sent me?" And instead of, think about the phrases that we have. I am who I am what I am, or I am who I will be. Those are not names. Literally. Like, that's not a name. My name is Jeff, and I'm going to introduce you to this person, and they tell you, oh yeah, I am who I am. Okay, what's your name? I am who I am. That's an evasion on God's side. Clearly, he's not actually given a name at all. I am who I am is not a name. It's a repetition, which, if you didn't know, in ancient Hebrew, when you see the same thing multiple times, it's to emphasize it. Basically, what God has told Moses here is, don't worry about me. I will do what I need to do. I am not insecure in who I am, even if you are. He's saying a lot of things in this, but the one thing God is not saying above them all is his actual name. He is literally defying this ancient practice of controlling a deity through knowing what its name is. He's defying it, which is also defying our modern instance in this Jehovah's Witness cult, that they think that if they know what God's name is, or the Freemasons, they have the secret name of God, all of this, that if you know what God's name is, you can manipulate or control him. There's a lot of Pentecostal and charismatic cult-ish things that if you know what a demon's name is, then you can manipulate it or control it. Or if you know what an angel's name is, you can manipulate or control it. God is speaking directly towards that superstitious, either blatant idolatry or borderline idolatry, depending on where it's manifesting, and saying, you don't get to know what my name is. You don't get to. This is what you will refer to me as, but it's not my name. And this is why we call God God. This is why we call God Adonai, which means Lord. This is why we call God Elohim, which is God above all. This is why we call it this is why we call God all these other things, which are references to the way he's revealed himself, as well as pairing things like Jehovah with different revealed traits to himself in a specific circumstances, like Jehovah Jireh, Jehovah Rophe, Jehovah Sidkenu, these kind of things, because God's name is not for us to attain, but he has revealed himself in specific ways that allow us to entertain him and to be in relationship with him. But we can't control him. He is the one who is still Lord.